The Goose Girl. In a blissful and tranquil land, there once reigned a righteous and loyal king. His queen, too, was a kind-hearted woman. Fate blessed the royal couple with a daughter who was not only beautiful, but also possessed all the good qualities of her parents. However, the king himself was not destined for a long life. He passed away at a young age. The widow queen was inconsolable, and this made the bond between mother and daughter even stronger. Years passed, and the princess grew into a beautiful young woman. Yet, the day drew near when the mother had to let her daughter go, to be handed over to her future husband, the prince of a distant kingdom. This was the tradition, and though the princess would miss her mother, she looked forward to her new life by the prince's side. The queen prepared a dowry for her beloved daughter: gold and silver, precious goblets and bowls, and the finest dresses were gathered as wedding gifts for the future couple. To ensure the princess was not alone in the foreign land, a chambermaid was sent with her to take care of her needs. Each of them was given a horse for the long journey. The princess's horse was named Falada, and it was special because it could speak. As the time for departure arrived, the mother queen shed bitter tears of farewell. Yet she wanted to give her daughter one final gift. Taking a knife, she cut her finger and let 3 drops of blood fall onto a white cloth. Carefully folding it, she handed it to the princess, saying, "Here, my child, may this protect you from all harm. Farewell." And so they rode away. After a few hours, the princess felt a terrible thirst and said to her maid, "I want to drink. Take my cup and fetch me some water from the brook over there." Her companion looked at her disdainfully and replied, "If you're thirsty, dismount and drink from the brook yourself. I'm not your servant." Uncertain and surprised, the princess silently got off her horse and went to the brook. Now she had to drink from the stream without her golden cup. At that moment, the 3 drops of blood on her cloth spoke to her. If your mother only knew, her heart would break. However, the princess remained humble and said nothing. She mounted her horse again, and they continued their journey. After a few more hours of travel under the hot summer sun, the princess was thirsty again. Passing by a river with clear water, she had already forgotten the previous incident and asked her maid again, "Dismount and fetch me some water in my golden cup. I'm terribly thirsty." The chambermaid's response was even more disdainful this time. "If you want to drink, dismount and do it yourself. I'm not your servant." Once again, the princess hesitated and dismounted. Going to the water's edge, the 3 drops of blood on her cloth spoke to her once more. If your mother knew, her heart would break. Bowing humbly, the princess leaned over the water and drank. In doing so, the cloth with the 3 drops of blood fell from her, landing on the water. Before she could react, the current carried it away. The princess could only watch helplessly and sadly. The chambermaid, observing this, laughed conspiratorially, for she knew that the princess had lost her mother's protection. As the princess returned to her horse and was about to mount, the maid said, "You will ride on my horse. The royal horse is mine." The princess was about to object when the maid interrupted her. "And you will take off your clothes. You will wear mine, and I will wear the royal clothes. Before you protest, know that if you do, I promise I will kill you right here. And if you tell anyone, I will find you and kill you." Silently, the former princess nodded and tearfully agreed. Thus, the delicate princess had no choice. She put on the chambermaid's clothes and mounted the maid's brown horse. In turn, the maid smugly and contently mounted Falada in the royal garments. The horse had witnessed everything and said to the maid, "What you are doing is not right." However, the maid ignored the horse's words and both rode on towards the castle. Upon their arrival, joy was overwhelming. People welcomed them exuberantly and led the two women to the king. They assisted the false princess in dismounting and guided her up the stairs to meet the king's son. The true princess had to remain below. Yet the king, observing the arrival of the two women, noticed the young lady and recognized her delicate beauty. Thus he approached the false princess, greeted her, welcomed her, and inquired about the noble young woman who had accompanied her. The false princess responded disdainfully, "I took her along as company on the journey. Kindly provide some tasks for the maid so that she won't be bored all day. She's good at menial and dirty work." With these words, she grinned conspiratorially at the king. However, the old king had no tasks for the young woman, and he had to consider for a while until he remembered that his stable boy, Kurtjan, might need help with the geese. And so, the once princess became the Goose Girl in the castle. The false bride was content with her new life. She could now sleep in a silk bed and didn't have to worry about anything anymore. However, one concern lingered in her mind. She turned to the young king and asked him, "Dearest husband, I would like to ask you a favor." "Of course. What can I do for you, my princess?" "Please summon the butcher and have the horse on which I arrived beheaded. It annoyed me on the way and knocked me down several times." She feared that the talking horse, Falada, would eventually reveal her deception, so she wanted to get rid of the horse. When the day came for the noble horse to die, the Goose Girl learned about it. She hurried to the butcher and pleaded with him to spare the poor animal. However, he also had no choice but to obey the royal command. Thus, the Goose Girl asked him to hang the horse's head under the dark city gate through which she had to pass every morning and evening with the geese. This way, she could at least see the horse when she set out for work in the morning. The butcher, seeing how sad and downcast the young woman was because of the horse, agreed to do as she requested. The next morning, as she passed through the dark gate with the stable boy, Kurt, she saw Falada's head hanging above the spoke. "Oh, Falada, what a terrible fate has befallen us." And the horse responded, "Oh, poor young princess, marching along with the geese. If only your mother knew. Her heart would break at your misery." And so the Goose Girl walked silently through the town streets and went out to the field with the geese. Once outside, she sat on the grass, let her golden hair loose so it could dance in the wind, and observed the geese. Kurt saw the grace of the young woman and was utterly surprised. The young rascal wanted to tease her and tuck her hair, yet the Goose Girl sensed his impudent plan and called out to the wind, "Blow, blow, little wind, and take away Kurt's hat. Let it chase after him until I've braided my hair again." Immediately, a strong gust of wind came, lifting Kurt's hat and sending the bewildered boy running after it. Afterward, the boy was so angry and frustrated that he no longer wanted to bother the young woman. The next day, as they passed through the dark gate again, the former princess spoke once more. "Oh, Falada, what a terrible fate has befallen us." And Falada replied, "Oh, poor young princess, marching along with the geese. If only your mother knew. her heart would break at your misery." Once again the young goose girl went out to the fields with Court and let her hair fly in the wind. And today the cheeky stable boy wanted to make up for what hadn't worked the day before. So he sneaked up on the goose girl, but before he reached her, she said again, "Blow, blow, little wind, and take away Kurt's hat. Let it chase after him until I've braided my hair again." And once again, a gust of wind came and lifted the boy's cap off his head, making him chase after it. This went on for a few more days, and the stable boy grew angry with the young goose girl that had outsmarted him. So he went to the king and asked, "I don't want to herd the geese with a girl anymore." "Why?" asked the old king curiously. "She annoys me all day long, and I'm tired of constantly chasing my hat." The king looked puzzled at Court. "How did that happen?" Then Court began to recount. "In the morning, when we pass under the dark gate, there's the hat of a horse hanging there, and she talks to it. She laments her fate, and the hat even replies to her, saying, 'Oh, princess, marching along with the geese, if only your mother knew, her heart would break at your misery.'" And so Curtian continued to narrate what happened in the goose field and how he had to chase after his hat in the wind. The old king calmed the agitated court and ordered him to march out with the goose girl the next day, just like they had been doing every day before. He himself also went under the dark gate early in the morning and waited in a corner. He saw the stable boy and the goose girl approaching, and indeed, under the gate, the young woman took a brief pause and spoke to the horse's head, just as Court had told him. Then she continued to the field, let her golden hair flutter in the wind, and spoke to the wind. Her hair was so wondrous and shone in the sunlight that it was hard to believe. The king had now observed everything and couldn't find peace. He pondered over the girl's mystery. So in the evening, he had the goose girl summoned to him. He addressed her and asked her to tell him what had happened. "I can't tell you or anyone else. I swore to keep it a secret," replied the goose girl. When he realized that his questioning wasn't leading anywhere, he said, "All right, then pour out your sorrows to the iron stove down in the kitchen." The young goose girl assumed that her silence had angered the king, so she ran down to the kitchen and crawled into the iron stove. Inside, lonely and with tears in her eyes, she began to lament. "What a terrible fate has befallen me. Now I'm sitting here, abandoned by the world, yet I'm a princess. The false princess forced me with violence to change clothes, had my horse executed, and took my groom away. And now I must live as a goose girl in this castle. If only my mother knew, her heart would break with worry and grief." The old king wasn't angry when he sent the goose girl to the kitchen. He was a wise man, for he sat by the stovepipe and heard every single word the young woman said. When he had heard everything, he ordered his servants to take the princess out of the stove and give her clean and fine clothes. They were to place her in one of the chambers and take care of her. And so the old king also went to his son and told him that their false bride had fooled them all. She was the former chambermaid of the princess, and the goose girl was the real princess who had been replaced by a trick. The young king was also happy about this news. The false bride was cold, and his heart didn't warm to her. So the father and the son planned a splendid feast for the next day to settle the matter. Alongside many guests, the real princess was also present, now in elegant clothes and adorned with jewelry. She didn't recognize the false bride when they all took their seats at the table. After a good meal and the festive atmosphere in the hall, the old king approached the false bride and gave her a riddle. He told the story he had heard from the princess in the oven and finally asked, "What judgment would you pronounce in such a case, future queen?" The false princess had grown accustomed to her new life and wasn't reminded of her own life, so she spoke coldly, as was her nature. "A deceiver like that is worth nothing more than being put naked into a barrel lined with nails on the inside, and this barrel should be drawn through the city by 2 white horses until it's over for her. A harsh judgment that you've just pronounced upon yourself." And so it happened, as the false princess had demanded. After a few weeks, peace returned to the city, and the excitement was forgotten. The young king and the real princess had found each other and fallen deeply in love. A splendid wedding reconciled everyone, and the life of the former Goose Girl changed once again. And soon, everything was about to change for the fairy kingdom as well.
Follow our YouTube channel and don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. See you soon in the Graphic Kingdom.